Hey guys, I'm Susanne. This is Jeremy. We just want to welcome you back to the Imperfect show. And we just want to thank you for continuing to watch and listen to what we have to say. It's not much, but these are just some things that we have gone through in our life that we wanted to share with you guys, and just wanted to say thank you. Today we're actually going to be talking about something that someone mentioned in the comments that they would like to kind of for us to talk about.
Right.
And so we are addressing that today.
Yeah, so if you have something you want us to talk about, we do the show every week, and we have plenty of opportunities to talk about really anything that you'd like to deal with. It's the Imperfect show. We're all imperfect. We're all struggling. We've all got our things. So share what your thing is, and we'll do our best to deal with that as we have an opportunity. But today we're going to deal with one of those issues that honestly we can all relate to, but most of us don't like to talk about. I know that I don't like to talk about it. I don't even like to help other people talk about it because it's such a complex issue, but one that hits all of us. It's the issue of anxiety. So right where you are, raise your hand if you've ever struggled with anxiety. I think we could raise our hands here. You're raising your hands. I can see those hands. Thank you. You can put them down. Anxiety is something we've all dealt with, and it's something that we all understand to one degree or another, and something that's really important for us to talk about, and this seemed to be a good venue for a discussion like that. A couple of disclaimers as we get started, because I want you to know where we're coming from. And the first one is this. We are not going to attempt today, over the next couple of minutes, we have about 30 minutes, we're not going to attempt to approach the issue of anxiety from a clinical standpoint and talking about clinically what it is and how to address it through therapies and all those things. That's not what this is about. Our desire is to share our experience a little bit, share perhaps even some of the experiences of others that we know, and give you some practical thoughts, some practical tools, some perspectives that you can use as you deal with these things. So understand that's where we're coming from. Now, I say that because of the next thing, and here's something else you need to understand as we jump into this. We also understand that everyone in the world deals with what they call anxiety differently. Some people, anxiety means worry that they're not going to make it to work on time. And so there's some anxiety as they're getting there. For other people, anxiety means they're in bed for a week and can't talk to people, can't eat, can't function, and they need real medical help. And there's a lot of room between those two things. So this is, again, not an attempt to put anyone in a box or a category or to tell you what your experience is. It's just to share with you some things that you can do to get to the place where you can function in spite of your anxiety. Maybe get a different perspective on it and see it a little bit more clearly. And understanding that people fall in different, kind of places on the scale. One of the things you may need to do, and I'm saying this as we get into this, if you are in the place where you're in a bed, you can't get out and you can't eat and you can't talk to people and you can't function, or maybe your body is reacting. Sometimes anxiety, worry, fear leads to depression. It can lead to very real physiological issues of high blood pressure, racing heart, lightheadedness. People pass out because they're so overwhelmed with anxiety. These are things that really happen to real people, and they're not bad people. They're just people that are responding physiologically to what's happening in their world. If that's where you find yourself, the thing you need to do is see a doctor. See a medical professional, let someone help you, and even give you some treatments, perhaps give you some medication that you can use to get to a place where you can get the perspectives that we'll talk about today. I think we would both agree that medication is not the long-term solution to any of these issues. However, it can be a tool that's used to help you get to the place where you can function normally and think clearly and make good decisions and learn how to manage a lot of the issues that cause the type of anxiety that we often deal with. So that's our big disclaimer. So now we only have like 25 minutes. So we're going to jump into this really big issue in 25 minutes. Again, anxiety is something that we've all experienced. Susanne and I were talking about this, and she was sharing that even in the last few days, there's been some anxiety. But a few years ago, you dealt with anxiety in a more real way, and more real, again, however people deal with it is how they deal with it. How you're dealing with it today is fine. Whatever, it's real.
It's real too.
It's real. It's all real. But you dealt with it in a way that was debilitating in some sense. Can you talk about that a little bit and what that feels like? And then let's talk about how we, at least functionally, can define anxiety so that we know how to move forward as we're talking about this.
Yeah, so really and that was the first time I had really felt anxious about something that caused me to physically, actually have a physical response to kind of what I was dealing with, I think mentally and emotionally. And it was at a time where we were in a time of transition in our lives, and we were getting ready to move and kind of do basically it was going to be a major life transition for us. And I started to physically respond, I think, to some of the stresses that we were going through, to just some of the outward things that we were having to deal with as a result of the decision that we were making to kind of move on. And so I started really having a lot of waking up at night, heart racing, and it was kind of constantly there. I was having a hard time breathing. A couple of times I was very disoriented just driving through town. I would just in the middle of driving have no idea where I was, and I would have to ask the kids, like, hey, are we running errands? Are we going home? What street should I be driving down? Because I have no idea where I even am. Right. And that was really kind of scary because it was the first time ever that really happened to me in that way. I had been nervous about things before, and sometimes you get nervous and you have kind of like butterflies in your belly or whatever. Yeah. But this was not like that at all. It was really physically starting to affect me. And so that kind of disorientation where I would get lost in the middle of town while I was driving around, not know where I was, after a couple of days turned into numb feeling in my arm. It was very much like high blood pressure, heart kind of issues is what I thought I was having. So got to the point where I did go to the emergency room, and he confirmed that it was just, I was probably having, maybe it was like early mild panic attack or something like that. And so he did give me some medication.
You thought you were having maybe a heart attack
or
something else, right?
And it was those kinds of symptoms where I was having a hard time breathing. My left arm was hurting. It was going numb. It was those kinds of things. And so I did not take the medication because I just didn't feel like that was right for me. I was able to kind of do some other things. But that was the first time. That was the first time that really it affected me physically in that way, that I just felt like, okay, I have to get a hold of this because it's going to really start to affect my life and keep me from physically being able to do things. Yeah. And so at that time, I really, or since then, have still continued to have to deal with those kinds of things. But now being able to understand, okay, when it's happening, this is what it actually is. And for me, I like to be in control of situations. And so there was a lot of things happening at that time that I could not control. And I learned that for me, someone that likes to be in control, when things happen that I can't control or things that make me nervous to an extreme way are what kind of now starts to have those things happen to me again. Yeah. And so now I have kind of learned some ways for me that I can manage that a little bit better.
Yeah. So in any discussion like this one, when you're talking about a specific topic, I think you need to have a working definition. Mm-hmm. So again, I'm sure there is a clinical definition. I'm sure a therapist would sit us down and give us a long definition. But practically, and I think that's what's important to us, we need to have a working definition. So this is what we kind of settled on as we were talking about this today. So as we're going forward, here's the definition we're using. Anxiety is a mental and physical response to things out of our control. Mm-hmm. A mental and physical response to things out of our control. The out of our control is really important, and we'll come back to that in a second, but it's a mental, physical, I would say even often spiritual response to things that are out of our control. And again, that impacts everyone differently. For some, when I go through moments of what I would call anxiety, it's when, often related to either our family or finances. These tend to be the two things I worry about, and not just our personal finances, but the organization that I oversee and the other areas that I'm responsible for finances. I worry about those things, and typically I worry about them when I'm tired or when I've been sleeping and I wake up and something triggers a thought in my mind, and I lay there for the next couple of hours worried about them. Then I wake up in the morning, the sun is up, things are happening, and that anxiety has passed. The times of lingering anxiety, again, for me, it's more of it's just a lingering thought. It's not the same thing. And different people deal with that different. But what causes that? Most of the time, anxiety, we can use other words. We can use fear, worry. Sometimes these things lead to a depression. they're often caused by those things that are out of our control. That's why it happens during seasons of life change. Now, we live in a world where things are constantly changing, even if they're not in our own lives. And so social media has contributed to this in a huge way.
Yeah, I think so too.
More diagnosed cases of anxiety amongst teenagers and adolescents than at any other time in history. More kids on antidepressants and medication to deal with anxiety than at any other time in history. What causes that? They're worried about things that are outside of their control. And so understanding that should put some perspective on this for you. Most of the time, what we're anxious about are things that we cannot control. I wrote a few things down, and these are a couple of thoughts that we want to work through. Again, we don't have a lot of time, so we can't dive into these deeply. But with that as the premise, here are some things you need to think about when you're feeling anxious. And we've already had our disclaimers, right? So we've worked through that, but you're feeling anxious. Here are a couple of things that you need to understand. Understand number one, and we can talk about this. There is a difference between how you feel, what is real, and how you act. There's a difference between how you feel, what is real, and how you act. And here's what I mean by that, and then if you can maybe expound on that a little bit, right? We all have feelings. Anxiety is a feeling. It's something that we feel. It's extremely emotional. How you feel is not always a reflection of what is real. Remember, anxiety is tied to that which is out of your control. Sometimes what's out of your control is something you're making up in your head. It's something someone else is involved in. It's not necessarily real. So how you feel is not necessarily tied to something that's real. So the first thing you have to do when you're dealing with this is go, all right, is how I'm feeling reflecting reality? Is how I'm feeling reflecting reality? Then get data, ask questions, figure things out. If you can't figure it out, then maybe it's not real enough to worry about right now. Is how I feel tied to reality? And based on those two things, how am I going to respond to it? Some people act out of their anxiety. They respond to how they feel, but they don't have to if they choose not to.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like as well with anxiety, and maybe that's how you feel, and it is something that maybe is tied to something that, like a situation that happened in the past, or it could be due to maybe some pressures that were put on you in the past, or maybe, not way far in the past, but maybe it could be somewhat recently for you. And so you have a lot of anxiety when you're put in that situation, again, maybe in a different environment, and it causes kind of that stress that you felt back then to kind of come up again, maybe even worse this time.
Even though what happened then is not your current reality.
Right.
But you're responding as though it is.
Yes. Because like those feelings, and I'm speaking from personal experience, because those feelings come up again, and you just think like, oh wow, like the people around me are going to respond the same way again if I do it this way, or if I don't get it perfectly right, then it's not going to work out the way it's supposed to. But it's not founded in what is real for you right now. And so for me personally, when I deal with this now, I always have to remind myself, okay, like I have different people around me now, my situation is different, and the response is not going to be the same. And so it's really important to stop sometimes and ask. Now, sometimes just randomly, and this is what I was telling Jeremy is happening this week for some reason, I just have been dealing with with that feeling that something's off, it's not right, but just that those same kind of physical responses of like that anxious feeling, the heart beating really fast, the kind of shortness of breath, and it's not really founded in anything that's going on. And sometimes in those moments, I have to just stop myself and ask questions. Why am I feeling like this? What's going on that's maybe causing this? And instead of just allowing it to continue without addressing it internally or addressing it to myself, then that a lot of times will help me just to be a little more grounded in that. Sometimes it doesn't cause the physical response to go away, but it at least helps me to be able to deal with it a little bit better when I ask myself those questions. Like, is this actually real? What's happening? Why am I feeling like this? What is my reality? What are my surroundings like? What are the people around me like? How are they responding to me? A lot of times that's very, very helpful just to be able to get on the other side of it. And like I said, sometimes it doesn't cause those feelings to go away, like the physical response that your body's having. But it does help a lot to be able to kind of walk through it and deal with it a little bit easier. Yeah,
I think comparison has is a big aspect in this. we look at other people, and again, social media is not evil. I like social media. It's helpful in a lot of ways. But it causes us to compare ourselves to other people. So we'll say, I'm not as good of a husband or wife. I'm not as good a parent. I'm not as good as work as all of these other people on social media because look at their lives. And so we start to get anxiety about what we're not compared to them. But we need to ask the question, is that real? Now, that's not to tear down the people that are putting stuff on social media, but is it real? Is what I'm seeing real? And does that have anything to do with me? Or am I completely out of control of that? I'm comparing myself to something that may or may not be true, but it doesn't matter to me. It has zero impact on me. And I should not, even though I feel this way because of what I'm seeing, respond to what I'm seeing. And sometimes we respond to things that aren't even real. The news media, this is again a huge one. We live in a world where information is being pushed at us all the time.
Yeah.
And so we get scared. We get scared about who's going to be the next, we're in a presidential cycle right now. So who's going to be the next president? And if they become the president, what in the world's going to happen? I remember during the last election, Everett was so worried. Our son, who is 10 now, so he was 7 then, I guess. He was so worried about who would become president because he heard somewhere that if one of the two people became president, all the Bibles would be taken away from us and we couldn't go to church anymore. That's what he heard. I don't know where he heard that. He didn't hear that from me, but that's what he heard. He was scared to death. He was anxious about that, but it wasn't real. It wasn't true. And even if it was true, there was nothing he could do about that. And so we often live that way. So understand, number one, the difference between how you feel, what is real, and how you act. Here's the second part. I think this is where I struggle a little bit in relationship to this. Number two, deal with underlying issues. You mentioned this, but deal with underlying issues. So if you have first looked at the situation and asked the question, is this real? Is how I'm feeling real? Is it related to anything that's happening right now? And the answer is no. Then perhaps there's something underneath the surface. Something you have not dealt with, something that happened to you as a child, something that happened to you in another relationship. How many relationships disintegrate, not because of what's happening in this one, but because of what happened in another one? Is there something in the past or something going on currently that I have not dealt with yet, I have left unaddressed? To me, the whole thing here is control what you can control and stop trying to control the things that you can't. Here's what you can control. You can control dealing with those issues of the past. When I have feelings of anxiety over the shortcomings in my life, many times it goes back to some area that I failed in the past or that I feel like I failed in the past, something that I didn't do right. And I need to deal with those and address those so they don't continue to impact my present. You have to deal with the past.
You have to deal with the past. And for people that don't like to be out of control, I think that's a huge problem.
Right.
Because we can't control what happened there, but we can control what happens now. And if you are someone that, this is where I would really identify with someone that I don't like to be out of control. And this is in every area of my life, physically, emotionally. I just don't like to be out of control. And so I think that this issue of physically responding to anxiety in this way has really been scary for me because you feel so out of control. And
that causes more anxiety.
It causes more anxiety. And but you have to deal with those things that are maybe those underlying issues. And so for me, it's okay, this feeling of having to be in control all the time. And when situations happen that I can't control, or that, a lot of times things will physically happen, or even now within our family dynamic, things are changing so much with our, kids getting older, and Maggie and Ethan are adults, so they're kind of moving on, doing things, and we can't control, what happens to them or kind of what they're doing. And so that brings a lot of maybe anxiety with our family situation as well. And so just learning to deal with that issue of control and needing to have that all the time. So definitely dealing with the underlying issues. And I think we were talking about fear too, and how sometimes that is something that causes anxiety. And so for me as well, I do not like to stand in front of people and talk at all. Doing the show causes me a lot of anxiety in this way because I have a lot of fear of not being perfect, of not being good enough, of not looking like I'm supposed to, or this is not going to come out. The outcome of this is not going to be what it's supposed to. and just kind of letting go of some of those things and the things that cause for me the fear of not being good enough or not acting good enough or being good enough and looking good enough, and all those things cause me a lot of fear. So getting ready to speak in front of people, that causes me a lot of anxiety, but it's rooted in that fear of it's not going to turn out the way I want to. Maybe I'm going to say something that I haven't planned, or I'm going to say something that I'm like, why? It's not going to make sense to those people. And so those things for me would be things that I need to deal with, that I am dealing with. And when I have those feelings of anxiety, I often look to those places first. Okay, like what is this? Like I said, identifying what's actually real right now and what's the actual problem. Why am I feeling like this? Because, okay, I'm having an issue right now because I cannot control the situation. Or I'm fearful that the outcome is not going to be what I want it to be.
Yeah, deal with the underlying issue. It may be something in the past. It may be your current situation. Kids are a great example. If your kids are doing stuff, you want to control them, but you can't control them. There's nothing you can, you have limited control, I guess, but as they get older, they move on. You can't control every aspect of their lives, and understand that, but understand also that that's the source of your anxiety. Deal with that issue. Maybe you're not trusting God to take care of them enough. Maybe whatever. Maybe there's some unresolved issue between you and them, and you're afraid that if something were to happen to them, that you wouldn't deal with that. Maybe what they're doing highlights for you something in your own past. Whatever it is, deal with the issue, current or past, so that you can address the anxiety in your life. How you feel is related to something, maybe not a truth now, but maybe something else that's going on. So that's the second thing. Deal with the underlying issues. Number 3, we've talked a lot about this, so we don't need to spend a whole lot of time here, but understand the relationship between anxiety and control. Understand the relationship between anxiety and control. And I think we've spent a lot of time talking about this, but anxiety is rooted in my need for control. So that's where it comes from. I would say connected to this though, understand the relationship between anxiety and hope. Anxiety and hope. And hope is the answer to so many questions in life, because hope is the confidence, I think we've said this before, but hope is the confidence that there's something beyond this. Anxiety comes when we look at how we feel, we conclude that this is all there is, that it's not going to get better, and that we're stuck. Hope says there's something bigger than this, there's something outside of this, and for people of faith, I think we'd have to conclude that God is outside of this, the Creator, and we can look to Him and have confidence in Him, and that hope elevates our view from our current situation to one who actually does have control over what's happening. Yeah. There's a strong relationship between moving forward with anxiety and hope.
And that's when I think that anxiety or the physical response to it can be so debilitating, is when we're not able to look at the underlying issues and then not just stay there. So like we talked about control, we talked about fear, recognizing those as these are the reasons I'm dealing with this anxiety or that I'm physically responding this way, but being able to look beyond that and say, okay, well, I maybe I can't control this situation, I can't control this person, but I can trust that God will, take care of this. I can trust that God will take care of, them. And so that is allowing that control to turn to like trust, and maybe that fear to turn again like to trust, or allowing God to define. And we talked about this in I think the last couple of episodes as well, allowing God to define who you are, for you, and allowing God to take that fear away from you and turn it into something that now you can say, I can rely on Him to help me through this. And so it's turning that into something that, and I think that's what gives us hope, is that we can turn those underlying issues and we can look at those, okay, well, this is what I'm dealing with, but I don't have to stay there. I don't have to stay in this, this allowing this physical anxiety and this physical way to control me, but I can deal with the underlying issues, but I can move past them. Yeah. And it's not, I don't think it's a like one and done thing. Like for me, no. I feel like this is what I'm constantly dealing with this. Right. And so I often will look at, from a spiritual perspective, look at, well, what is God trying to show me in this situation, and where in this area of control that I struggle with, do I still need to relinquish that over to Him, and maybe just constantly doing that. Yep. And I feel like that's His way of reminding me, okay, like I'm in control, this is going to be fine, and I just need to continue to allow Him to be that for me. So.
Right, you can't control it. So that takes us to the last point, which is release control. So you've gone through this process, understanding the difference between how you feel, what is real, and how you act. Let's determine, is this real? Is it not real? If it's real, let's deal with it. If it's not, then we can act in a way contrary to how we feel. Which leads to the second thing, deal with the underlying issue, whatever that is. Maybe it's not what you think it is. Maybe it's something that happened in your past, something that keeps coming up every time you're placed in a new situation. Maybe it's something that's happening in your life that's outside of your control. Again, we use the illustration of kids, but it can be so many other things. It can be the economy. It can be our politics. It can be something that's happening somewhere else in your life. Understand that's what it is. Deal with that to the extent that you can. Control what you can and move on. Then understand the relationship, not only between anxiety and control, but anxiety and hope. Hope, seeing that there is something beyond this. You've dealt with the issue, underlying or current, or in the past or current, that underlying issue. You've decided to respond in a positive way because there's more to life. There's something else out there. You're elevating your view to something beyond this. And in all of that, then you release control. Don't release control of the things you can control. You must be responsible for yourself. You need to make good decisions. Sometimes we have anxiety because we make bad decisions. Okay? Mm-hmm. Well, work on that. I'm going to say fix it, but go back, work on that. Deal with those decisions. Don't blame other people. Be responsible for those things that you can control. Control them and let go of everything else. And that's a process you can overlay in your life, as Susanne said, again and again and again. Now, we only have a couple of minutes, but I want to share two passages that are often used as it relates to anxiety. And sometimes I think wrongly, sometimes in a helpful way. But one is Philippians chapter 4 and verse 6. The Bible says, "Be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God, and the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus." Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 and 7. It says, "Be careful for nothing." That word careful, it can be translated anxious for nothing, be concerned about nothing. But in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. Again, this is not me saying just pray more. That's not what I'm saying. But we have a God who offers hope when we are going through those moments that bring careful, or anxiety, and we can cast our gaze, put our gaze on Him through prayer and supplication. This isn't tossing a prayer up to God and hoping He's going to work it out. This is diligently, carefully, intentionally praying and asking God to work in our lives. And again, the process of that, it unburdens us. It puts us in a place where God can really have control, the control that He does have. And it allows Him then to put or instill within us the peace that passes understanding. Why does peace come? Because we've taken our hands off of it. And we've trusted the one who is God, who has control. Now again, are there sometimes physiological impacts of all this anxiety? There are. And if you've lived a life of anxious living, if you've been a person given to anxiety and those kind of things, your body, your mind are programmed to respond, even physiologically, and that's going to happen. But the fight is here. It's a spiritual fight. It's an emotional fight. It's a fight that says, in spite of how I feel, I'm going to let God take this and control it. I might continue to feel the way that I feel, but I'm not going to be anxious or overwhelmed by that. I'm going to let Him do that. And then the other one, you know this one probably, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. "Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct thy paths." Sometimes anxiety comes because we just don't understand. We don't get it. Then we start to worry. Then we become overwhelmed with anxiety and fear and depression and the rest of it. And that's a bad place to live. Trust God, not in a trite or growing up around church, people say, just pray more, just trust God more. That's not what this is about. This is about going through this process of asking, is this real? Is it not real? Do I have to respond to how I feel right now? Have I dealt with whatever the underlying issues are? Do I understand the relationship between anxiety and control and hope? Do I understand how those things relate and have a hope that something bigger is out there and that I can look beyond this? And am I willing to release control, not just to, the universe, but to a God that actually has control?
Mm-hmm. I think one of the largest, or one of the biggest ways that you can see that you've actually done that, like this step of releasing control. And I love that verse in Proverbs that trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. So we're not leaning on the things that we can understand or that we know to be true, but we're leaning on the things that we know to be true about God and what He can do in our lives. And And so many times I feel like I've allowed those feelings of anxiety to keep me from moving forward, or to keep me from doing something that I feel like God wants me to do, or to even leave the house, to go to the gym, just to do simple things in life. Sometimes that anxiety, that maybe fear of not performing well enough or whatever, has kept me from doing things. And so I think that is a huge test of true release of that control, is when you continue to move forward in life and do those things, even though maybe they may give you those feelings of anxiety, but not leaning on the things that you know to be true, but that you know to be true about God and what He can do through you.
And not in your own understanding.
Right.
Don't trust your feelings.
Yep.
They can be helpful, but they can also lead you down a very dark and difficult path.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
If you have any thoughts on this, we'd love to hear them. Please go ahead and comment. And again, we are very open to input. Positive input. If you have negative input, you can keep that to yourself. It causes anxiety. We don't need that.
Right, especially.
But if you have good input, positive input, you have a question, you have something you'd like for us to address, we'd be happy to do that. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. Hit the notification bell. That's one of the most important things you can do. That lets you know when new content comes online. And if you like this, go ahead and like it and comment on it and share it out to other people. We create this for one purpose, and that's to help folks who are dealing with some of the same stuff that we're dealing with, the same imperfect stuff we're dealing with.
Right.
So, thank you,
Yep.
and look forward to talking to you next time.
Thank you.